Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today not only to celebrate African American History Month, but to celebrate two stories lost to the mainstream history. The first story is the original Underground Railroad. The other story is of Josiah T. Walls. Students across the country have heard stories about the Underground Railroad during the Antebellum Period. However, there was a road to freedom that existed before the United States was even established, and that road went south to the free territory of Spanish Florida. In fact, the National Park Service held its 6th annual Underground Railroad Conference in St. Augustine in 2012 to highlight this very story, which started with 8 recorded families seeking freedom in 1608 in Florida. During this period, thousands of men, women, and children fled the colonies of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. These individuals headed to Florida to gain their freedom thanks to the Edict of 1693, which was issued by then Spanish government, that stated that any man, woman, or child who found their way to Spanish Florida would be granted freedom. The people at the heart of this story are the Gullah Geechees, who trace their lineage to West Africa. Once free in Florida, the Gullah Geechee people thrived, establishing communities, forts, and deep roots throughout Florida's 3rd Congressional District, roots that still can be felt to today. The second story is of Josiah T. Walls. He was a man that was born into slavery in 1842 in Virginia. He worked as a slave. The Civil War broke out. He was conscripted by the Confederate Army to serve as a cook in the Civil War. He got freed by the Union soldiers, served with the Union soldiers, and after the war, he moved to Florida to fight in the Spanish or the Seminole-American Wars. During that time period, the war ended, and he moved to Gainesville, Florida, where he became the first African-American mayor of our city where I come from. During that time, he became a very successful business person. He was elected to the Florida Assembly, and then later he was elected to the U.S. Congress, serving in this very body here today. His elections got challenged. He lost his role as a representative in the House, ran again the next year, won again, served a full term, and then the 3rd term he ran, won again, and his election got challenged by a Confederate soldier, and he lost his seat. He went on to become a prominent businessman in north central Florida, owned a farm, and was very successful until the freeze of 1906, which put him out of business. He moved to Tallahassee and became a newspaper owner and printed a local newspaper. He rose to prominence, but at his death, he was but a footnote in the histories of not just of our state, but of our country. Here is a man that was born into slavery, rose to prominence, and was forgotten by history. And I tell these stories because these stories, like many stories in our early history, must never be forgotten and must be remembered by our history lest we repeat it. It must also be taught to our children so that they are inspired and they see themselves in the history books like these other folks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.